what was the toughest thing that you went through in your teenage years that made you turn to drugs?
Probably running away so many times and, living in the bushes, scared to go home. I would say, oh man, there's so many tough ones. It's hard to classify the toughest. I would probably say teenage homelessness.
So just like the desperation, despair, the loneliness made you turn to drugs. But how do you think that equipped you, that same situation and circumstance equipped you to thrive in this life now in recovery?
So how did being homeless as a teenager guide my today and continue my... I didn't give up then, and I can't give up now. The strength in one is always built in darkness. And, looking back at it now, because we can never understand it in the moment, but sometimes we can understand it when we reflect or reminisce. It just made me tougher. Like, if I can make it out in the bushes as a 14-year-old runaway juvenile felon, life in recovery and sobriety can be managed.
Do you think that your parents being addicted to drugs had anything to do with you turning to drugs?
That's a double-edged sword for me. So I got into like a rehabilitation detox center in Fort Myers, Florida, and I actually asked one of the counselors that I at the time admired, and at the time I didn't understand genetic dispositions. I hadn't researched it or even heard the term, but I'm like, coach, we called him coach. Mom was an addict and dad was an addict. Am I destined to be an addict? And he said, no, you're you. Take your own lane. I do think the influence definitely caused substantial amounts because it was always in front of me. It was always, some of it didn't make sense till I used it and seen the same side effects later in life. I don't think so. Like in the beginning I thought, yeah, but not anymore. Is there some genetic disposition? Probably. But at the end of the day, it's up to you to get you better. It's up to you to go after what you're trying to go after. And that can be a good thing or it could be a bad thing.
So what did you want to be when you were younger, like when you grew up?
A marine biologist.
Which has absolutely nothing to do with what you do today.
Not even close. I'm actually managing a very large HVAC company now.
So you didn't grow up and say, I want to be a felon drug addict?
No, not at all. Like as a kid, I remember, I was fascinated with water and plants, and Grandma grew a bunch of orchids, bromeliads. I always had a green thumb, thanks to Grandma, and sticking a needle in my arm, homeless, smoking crack, running away as a 13 and 14-year-old, juvenile incarceration, adult incarceration, none of that was on the books.
So what was the hardest thing for you in the first 30 days of sobriety?
Sleep. Psychosis. I would say lack of sleep built from or in direct influence of mental psychosis. The mat I was on was sprayed with mace, and it got to the point I started writing letters to myself, third party, about how crazy I was on the inside. Definitely sleep though.
Do you believe that trauma or mental illness had anything to do with you becoming addicted to drugs?
Oh yeah. Sure. Both, probably. Trauma fueled why I didn't want to feel the way I felt, and underlying mental health not identified at that point in time in the game only fueled it.
Do you believe addiction is a disease or a choice?
Which came first, the chicken or the egg? For me on this one, I can't really side with either. Is it a disease or is it a choice, right? Did I have this disease and this genetic disposition and go out and use, or did I choose to call the man, wait on the man, commit the felony in the acquisition? Oh, man, this is such a controversial topic, right? I don't really side with either. I'm very neutral. I think it's both. You know, which came first, the chicken or the egg? They both came at the same time, and the chicken sat on the egg and had a rooster, is the only sense I can make of it. So I'm sort of kind of on the fence between those two.
Do you believe that people can get sober and just move on without participating in recovery?
Like no structure, no program, just I'm gonna flip the light switch and it's all gonna be okay?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's excessively rare. It's a rarity, maybe 1 in 10,000 people, but you got to do some type of program. You know, I went through a bunch of different programs. I didn't agree with certain things in certain programs. I wanted to argue points in certain programs. Not really. My brother tried it and he's dead.
When did you realize that you were worth having a good life?
Man. Months and months, if not a year or two into sobriety. You know, I felt like I was playing catch up. I was mad. Man, mostly at myself, right? Because my disease or my action or my choice or whatever they say put me where I was supposed to be. And that was in jail. A heroin charge. What was the question again? I'm sorry.
When did you realize that you were worth living a good life?
6 months, a year, something like that into sobriety.
What happened? Do you remember the moment? Did something click in your brain? And
I got my driver's license back after about 10 years of suspension. Never had a vehicle, never had a driver's license, always bummed rides, made somebody give me a ride, hopped a ride, walked, rode a bicycle. You know, once I got my driver's license back, I know I could go back to my career. And that's when I felt life was worth living, because I finally had a competitive edge compared to the old me.
meaning your driver's license and a way to make money.
Yeah, more doors
because
open.
Of your career.
Yeah, I had to walk through a lot of mud before I got to my first door, and that door was slammed in my face. And then I walked through the mud some more to get to the next door, and eventually those doors started to open for me.
So how do you feel about harm reduction?
What do you mean when you say harm reduction? Like, what does harm reduction mean?
So harm reduction is anything that people do to reduce harm. Meaning, say, if you take Suboxone instead of
Shoot some
heroin,
dope. Mm-hmm.
even harm reduction in a sense of, I'm not going to shoot heroin anymore, but I'm going to sniff it. That's a form of harm reduction, because you're less likely to anything that takes this step down from harm. So it's a wide variety.
The act of reducing harm. I mean, that's a tough one, right? Like, I'm going to sniff it instead of put it in a needle. I mean, that's like, yeah, that's a tough one for me, just because I graduated vice versa. But like handing out clean needles, educating people on Suboxone, taking Suboxone. Like, to me, it doesn't matter. Like, anything that makes you a better version of yourself, who am I to judge? I got in these programs and some people were so judgy, you know, and who are we to judge, right? So I feel 85% of harm reduction is super beneficial. And then I think the other 10 or 15% that lies on the thin line of controversial is more for an open door for when that person is ready, that they have somebody that they can talk to. Because the only people I was talking to was my buddies, and all they wanted me to do was get high with them. And then one at a time, they're dead.
So, how do you feel about the people who are on harm reduction medication, as far as methadone, buprenorphine, Suboxone, who are ashamed to speak out about it because people tell them they're not clean if they use medicine?
Bunch of finger pointers. What would I tell them?
Mm-hmm.
The people that are on it?
Mm-hmm.
Don't let other people's attitude affect your altitude. If you're on the bottom and you're trying to get up and trying to elevate your altitude, don't let nobody take your steering wheel from you, because you're driving your own car, you're sailing your own ship. Your path up the mountain might be different than the other path up the mountain, but once we all reach the top, it's a beautiful view.
How does gratitude keep you sober?
You know, I actually share gratitude lists with my buddy Justin. Big shout out, Justin. I actually do it right after consciousness. So they say, like, try not to touch your electronics for X amount of minutes, which I did for a while. I submerge myself in gratitude. Like, what am I grateful for? And the number one thing is always sobriety, recovery. And then it's an exercise in letting myself know every morning that things are going to be okay, and there's things worth living, there's things worth fighting for.
How important is some concept of a higher power to recovery?
Touching 6.5 years into this, huge. When I first got into it, not so much, because I was still trying to find my way. You know, I would hear people in the meetings and say, I didn't do any of it. My higher power did it. I don't owe my recovery to myself, my sobriety to myself. I owe it to my higher power. I used to look at these people crazy, like, what are you talking about? And only until about a year or two ago, probably, you influenced that into me substantially and worked with me before we got together. I think it's crucial. I really do. In some form. Everybody's form may be different, but the utilization of that form for that individual should be very important in the way I view it.
What's a piece of advice that you would give couples who are in recovery?
Like husband and wife, partner and partner, couples that are together while they're both in sobriety and recovery. No day is perfect. It's the management system y'all put into place. It's an exercise in places your weekend some days. Like, we still have our differences, and but communication is key, and faith is huge.
What do you think about the fact that you have become a father in your recovery?
I definitely think it's God's gift to me. We talked earlier in this video, or a different one, about how I had to surrender my rights. You sort of kind of had to deal with the rights of yours as well, but now our kids are back in our life, and I just think it's a blessing. I think it's just another chance. I blew my first couple chances, and that's something that I have to live with, but God gave me another couple chances. to make up for things that were out of my control because of my addiction at the time.
Is there anything that you think would be worth relapsing over?
Not anymore. Suicide gets to me before relapse does for some odd reason in those dark mental health days. So to relapse on drugs, nah. Too many people dead. Brothers dead. Almost everybody back in them streets in Southwest Florida is gone or prison. Couple of us made it out, but most of us didn't.
When dealing with the guilt and shame of your past mistakes, how do you walk out those living amends today?
One more time, I'm sorry.
When dealing with the guilt and shame of your past mistakes, things you cannot change, how do you walk out your living amends today?
I mean, some of them you can't. Some of them I couldn't make amends to. But I try to get myself right. One thing at a time. I had so much stuff to work on with myself, and then I had so much to work on because of the things that I did. And one thing at a time, one person at a time, one place at a time, one thing at a time. After I had some time under my belt would pop up, I'd see somebody in a grocery store that things got a little sideways on. I took from my cousin one time and took the cash and basically dipped on him. And I just so happened to see my aunt in the grocery store. This was like 2 years later, and I asked about my cousin. She's like, yeah, he's living with us. Actually, he's down bad right now, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't even have it, but I knew it wasn't mine. So I got it in my pocket, and I gave him like half of what I had owed him. And then Friday I got paid, and I finished it up. I just tried to make amends every way and every shape possible that I could, but I couldn't fix them all.
Why do you think it's important to speak out about recovery?
To let the person know that it's possible, to live by example, so it gives me an opportunity to meet people exactly where they're at. Some people are further down the road than others. Some people are stuck in a rut on the same road or in the same path. It basically is to shed light in them dark places. I just wish I had somebody like me to tell me it was going to be okay in the beginning. And there was a lack of that, so that inspired me to do what I do and for us to do what we do.
What is the biggest thing that you are proud of yourself for today?
I made this list. I was really huge on goals, right? Because I never had any goals. My goals was to get some dope and hopefully some water, piece of cotton. About a year into my sobriety, I had this crazy list of all these big, huge things. I didn't even have a driver's license at the time. Driver's license was on it. And I wrote down on this board all this different stuff that I was going to achieve, and I had some people come over, and some people laughed at it because it was astronomically big. And I literally have crossed off, it took me a while, but I've crossed off every single thing but one. I just put driver's license and just these big crazy things, right? Like things at the time that seemed out of reach. But I knew if I kept doing the next right thing, one step at a time, 1 second at a time, that at some point in time being resilient with a good work ethic and continuously working on myself, I would get there. So my biggest achievement was just crossing off all them goals except for that one that's left.
Anything else you want to share?
I don't think so. Nope. Just stay firm in your foundation. If you don't have a foundation, find one. Sometimes we'll venture off and in our path, and sometimes we have to turn around and take a different route, and that's okay. Don't be so judgmental of others, and don't be so judgmental of yourself. 6.5 years into this, I set expectations on myself and others. And when those expectations don't get met, it creates a trauma response in mental health. So be focused, be relentless in your pursuit. Understand that it's not going to be easy. It took me 10 years to destroy my stuff, and it's taken me 6.5 to build it back. If I can do it, you can do it. And just remain full of faith. Is that it?
That's it.